The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of what used to be downtown Prague when Captain Dmitry Kozlov first laid eyes on Dr. Valentina Torres. She stood in the makeshift laboratory, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing a stained lab coat over tactical gear. Her fingers moved with practiced precision as she examined alien tissue samples under a microscope, completely absorbed in her work. Dmitry had seen many brilliant people in his 34 years, but something about Valentina made him stop in the doorway. Maybe it was the way she hummed softly while working, or how she occasionally cursed in 3 different languages when something didn't go as planned. Whatever it was, he found himself lingering longer than necessary. You know, staring is considered rude in most human cultures, Valentina said without looking up from her microscope. Her voice carried a slight accent, Spanish mixed with something else he couldn't quite place. Good thing we're not in most human cultures anymore, Dmitry replied, stepping into the lab. Captain Dmitry Kozlov, Sector 7 Command. She finally looked up and he was struck by her eyes. They were brown, but not just brown. They held depths that seemed to reflect intelligence, determination, and something else that made his pulse quicken. Dr. Valentina Torres, xenobiology, and probably the only person on this continent who understands what makes these bastards tick. The ruins around them told the story of humanity's first contact with alien life. 6 months ago, the world had celebrated when the first extraterrestrial ships appeared in Earth's atmosphere. First contact protocols were activated, translation programs rushed into service, and humanity prepared to join the galactic community. Instead, they got war. The initial attack had been surgical, precise, and devastatingly effective. Major cities crippled, communication networks destroyed, military installations neutralized. But the aliens had made one critical error in their calculations. They assumed humans would surrender once their organized resistance was broken. They had never encountered a species that fought harder when cornered, that formed stronger bonds under pressure, that chose love over logic when survival was at stake. What have you learned about them? Dmitry asked, moving closer to examine her research notes. The papers were covered in diagrams, chemical formulas, and observations written in her neat handwriting. They're efficient, Valentina said, switching to a different sample. Ruthlessly so, 3 different species working together, each specialized for different aspects of conquest. The Kethmore are the strategists, reptilian, cold-blooded in every sense. The Sixva handle logistics and construction, insectoid hive minds that think in terms of colonies rather than individuals. And the Nulgath, she paused, a slight shiver running through her body. Energy beings that feed on fear and despair. They're the psychological warfare specialists. Dmitry watched her work, noting how her hands remained steady despite the subject matter. And what makes you think we can beat them? Because they don't understand us, she said, looking up at him again. They study our technology, our weapons, our tactics. But they completely miss what makes us human. They see our emotional attachments as weaknesses, our refusal to abandon each other as tactical errors. They don't realize that everything they consider our greatest flaws are actually our greatest strengths. Their eyes met across the lab table, and Dmitry felt something shift in the air between them. In the old world, he might have asked her out for coffee, taken time to court her properly. But the old world was gone, replaced by a reality where tomorrow was never guaranteed and every moment had to be lived fully. Show me, he said quietly. Valentina's breath caught slightly. She moved around the table, closer to him, and pulled up a holographic display of alien communication intercepts. Listen to this. It's from yesterday's reconnaissance mission. The alien voices were harsh, clicking sounds that the translation software rendered into mechanical English. Human resistance patterns remain illogical. Subject 7 Alpha terminated. 3 of our units to recover Subject 7 Beta's remains. Tactical gain 0. Emotional motivation, incomprehensible. Subject 7 Beta was Private Martinez, Dmitry said grimly. Good kid. Cessna Alpha was his girlfriend, Corporal Zhang. She died trying to bring his body home. Exactly, Valentina said, her voice softening. They can't understand why she would risk everything for someone already dead. They don't comprehend that love doesn't end with death, that humans will fight impossible odds for emotional rather than strategic reasons. Dmitri found himself stepping closer, close enough to smell her perfume mixing with the scent of lab chemicals and something uniquely her. And you think that's our advantage? I think it's our weapon, she whispered. They expect us to be logical, to cut our losses, to abandon the weak for the good of the strong. When we don't, when we choose love over survival, we become unpredictable. Unpredictable enemies are dangerous enemies. The lab fell silent except for the hum of equipment and their synchronized breathing. Dmitri reached out, gently touching her cheek with his fingertips. And what about us? Are we choosing love over survival? Valentina leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. Maybe. Or maybe we're choosing both. When she opened her eyes, the scientific detachment was gone, replaced by something raw and honest. I've been watching you for weeks, Dmitri. The way you never leave anyone behind. The way you still find reasons to smile even when everything's falling apart. You're exactly the kind of man who makes humans impossible to defeat. And you're exactly the kind of woman who makes fighting worthwhile, he replied, his thumb tracing her jawline. They kissed then, soft at first, then with growing intensity. It was a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope, of two people finding each other in the midst of chaos. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. This is probably a terrible idea, Valentina said, though she made no move to step away. Probably, Dmitri agreed, pulling her closer. But I've been having a lot of terrible ideas lately. It's part of being human. Their second kiss was interrupted by the sharp beep of Dmitri's communicator. He reluctantly pulled away, answering the call. Kozlov here. Captain, you need to see this, came the urgent voice of Lieutenant Jackson Williams. We've got movement in the upper atmosphere, big movement. Dmitri looked at Valentina, seeing his own concern reflected in her eyes. On our way. The command center was chaos when they arrived. Lieutenant Williams, a young African-American pilot with reflexes that bordered on superhuman, was coordinating with ground stations while Petra Nakamura, their chief tech specialist, worked frantically at her computer arrays. Her Japanese-American features were set in concentration as streams of data flowed across her screens. Talk to me, Jazz, Dmitri said, using Williams' call sign. Long-range sensors picked up a massive fleet dropping out of hyperspace, Jazz reported, his usual easy smile replaced by grim determination. Initial count suggests at least 300 ships, maybe more. They're maintaining position at the edge of the solar system. Reinforcements, Valentina said quietly. They're bringing in more forces. Petra looked up from her screens, her dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the displays. It's worse than that. I've been monitoring their communications. They're not just bringing more ships. They're bringing specialists, interrogation teams, psychological warfare units, and something they're calling cleansing protocols. Dmitri felt a chill run down his spine. How long before they reach Earth? At current velocity, maybe 18 hours, Jazz replied. But they're not moving yet. They're staging, like they're waiting for something. Commander Helena Voss entered the command center, her steel gray, hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her no-nonsense expression. At 52, she was the oldest member of their core team and had been fighting aliens longer than any of them. They're waiting for us to surrender, she said bluntly. Standard protocol for their species. Give the enemy time to consider their hopeless situation before delivering the final blow. Have they tried to communicate? Valentina asked. Oh yes, Helena said, activating the main display. Same message broadcasting on all frequencies. The screen filled with the image of a Kethmore commander, its reptilian features cold and calculating. When it spoke, the translation was crisp and emotionless. Humans of Earth. Your resistance has been noted and found wanting. The reinforcement fleet now assembled represents the combined might of 3 allied species. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Continue to resist, and we will make examples of your survivors that will echo across the galaxy. Charming, Dmitri muttered. There's more, Helena continued. Intelligence suggests they're particularly interested in studying our pair bonding behaviors. They've been observing how humans in relationships fight differently, with greater desperation and creativity. Valentina and Dmitri exchanged glances. They're studying us like lab rats, Valentina said. Let them study, Dmitri replied, his voice hardening. They still don't understand what they're dealing with. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Weapons were checked and rechecked, defensive positions reinforced, and evacuation plans updated. But beneath the military efficiency, something else was happening. Couples throughout the resistance were spending what might be their last hours together, and the intensity of their connections was creating a kind of energy that even the aliens were beginning to notice. Dmitri found Valentina in her lab again as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She was no longer working on alien samples. Instead, she was writing in a journal, her handwriting flowing across the pages. Recording our last thoughts for posterity? He asked, settling into a chair beside her. Recording our first thoughts, she corrected. Everything we've learned about them, about us, about what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable heart. Is that what we are? An immovable heart? Valentina set down her pen and turned to face him fully. I think we're something they've never encountered before. A species that becomes more dangerous when we have something to lose, not less. They conquer through fear and isolation, but every attack only makes us hold each other tighter. Dmitri reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. And what about us? Are we holding each other tighter? We're holding each other like we're never letting go, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. Even if tomorrow brings the end of the world. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien ships appear as tiny points of light in the darkening sky. Hundreds of them, each one representing destruction and death, yet somehow not seeming as threatening as they should. Dmitri, Valentina said finally, I need you to know something. What's happening between us, it's not just battlefield romance or desperation. It's real. It's the kind of real that would have happened even if there were no aliens, no war, no end of the world. I know, he said, bringing her hand to his lips. I felt it the moment I saw you, like recognition, like coming home to a place I'd never been. She smiled, the expression transforming her face from beautiful to radiant. That's what they'll never understand. They see love as weakness, as something that makes us vulnerable. They don't realize it's what makes us impossible to break. Show me, he said, echoing her earlier words. This time, when they kissed, it was with the full knowledge that they were choosing each other, not despite the danger, but because of it. Because humans didn't become less human when faced with extinction. They became more human, more connected, more willing to fight for what mattered. As night fell over the ruins of Prague, the alien fleet began to move. But in the makeshift lab, surrounded by the tools of science and war, two people discovered something that would prove more powerful than any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. They discovered that love, when wielded by humans, was the most terrifying force in the universe. The reinforcements were coming, but Earth's children were ready, not because they had better weapons or superior tactics, but because they had something worth fighting for. Each other. And that made all the difference. Tomorrow would bring fire and blood, but tonight brought something else entirely. Tonight brought the moment when humanity realized that its greatest strength wasn't its technology or its weapons. It was its heart. And hearts, when truly joined, were unbreakable. The alien fleet struck at dawn, just as Dmitri had predicted they would. The first wave came not as ships, but as energy pulses that turned the morning sky into a canvas of crackling electricity. Valentina watched from the reinforced observation deck as streaks of alien fire carved through the atmosphere, each one aimed with surgical precision at what remained of Earth's defensive installations. They're targeting our emotional centers, she said into her communicator, her scientific mind working even as explosions bloomed across the horizon. Look at the pattern. They're not just hitting military targets, they're hitting hospitals, schools, places where humans gather to care for each other. Dimitri's voice crackled back through the static-filled channel. Then we'll have to care for each other somewhere else. All teams, initiate Protocol 7. We're going underground. The next 6 hours were a blur of organized chaos as resistance. Cells across the globe activated deep bunker networks that had been prepared for this moment. The Prague sector's main bunker was a marvel of engineering hidden beneath the old subway system, expanded and reinforced over months of secret construction. But it wasn't the technology that impressed Valentina as they descended into its depths. It was the people. Every couple, every family, every pair of lovers moved with a synchronization that seemed almost supernatural. Mothers carrying children, while fathers cleared the path ahead. Young couples sharing the burden of heavy equipment without needing to communicate their intentions. Even strangers paired up instinctively, watching each other's backs as they navigated the crowded corridors. It's like a dance, Valentina murmured to herself, then spoke louder into her recorder. Field Observation 77 Alpha. Human subjects under extreme stress demonstrate enhanced cooperative behaviors. Pair bonding appears to increase efficiency rather than create liability. Talking to yourself again, Doc? Valentina turned to see Lieutenant Jazz Williams approaching, his usual cocky grin replaced by something more serious, but no less confident. Behind him walked a woman Valentina hadn't seen before, tall and athletic with short red hair and pilot's wings on her jacket. Jazz, good to see you made it, Valentina said. And you are? Captain Riley Chen, the woman replied, extending a gloved hand. Long-range reconnaissance. Just got back from a very interesting mission. Riley's been tracking the alien command structure, Jazz explained, and Valentina noticed how he moved slightly closer to the other pilot as he spoke. What she found changes everything. They made their way deeper into the bunker, past families, setting up in temporary quarters and soldiers checking equipment. The command center had been established in a natural cave system, its walls lined with screens showing feeds from hidden cameras across the city. Dimitri stood at the central console, with Commander Voss and Petra Nakamura, studying tactical displays. Captain Chen, Helena Voss said without looking up. Your report? Riley stepped forward, but Jazz moved with her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Valentina made a mental note about their body language even as she focused on the briefing. The reinforcement fleet isn't just bigger than we thought, Riley began. It's more diverse. I count at least 7 different species, including 3 we've never encountered before. But here's the interesting part. They're not getting along. Explain, Dimitri said, finally looking up from his displays. The Kethmore are the mission commanders, but the other species are questioning their tactics. Specifically, they're questioning why humans are proving so difficult to break. Riley activated a holographic display showing intercepted communications. The 6 Hive Queens are reporting efficiency losses because their drones keep getting confused by human cooperative behaviors. The Nolgath are actually retreating from areas with high concentrations of human couples because they can't feed on the emotional energy. Wait, Valentina interrupted, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. They can't feed on couples? But emotion is emotion. Fear is fear. That's what I thought too, Riley said. But watch this. She activated a recording of an alien energy being attempting to drain a human civilian. The man was alone, separated from his family, and the creature successfully induced a state of terror and despair. But then the recording switched to another scene where the same type of being approached a couple holding each other. The alien energy faltered, wavered, then actually recoiled as if burned. The couple's combined emotional field seemed to create a barrier the creature couldn't penetrate. Love is literally toxic to them, Jazz said, his voice filled with wonder. The stronger the emotional bond, the more it hurts them to get close. Petra looked up from her computer, her eyes bright with excitement. I've been analyzing the electromagnetic patterns from both scenarios. When humans are alone, their emotional output is chaotic, easy to disrupt. But when they're bonded, especially romantically bonded, the patterns become coherent, amplified. It's like emotional laser light. A weapon, Dimitri said quietly. The ultimate weapon, Valentina corrected. and they just brought 7 species to Earth to face it. The next phase of the alien attack began that afternoon. Instead of the surgical strikes of the morning, the invaders launched a full-scale assault on the bunker entrances. Kethmore shock troops, 6 of a warrior drones and the energy beings called Nulgath descended in coordinated waves. But humanity had learned to fight differently in the months since the first invasion. Gone were the old military hierarchies and individual heroics. In their place was something the aliens had never encountered: combat partnerships based on emotional bonds rather than tactical necessity. Dimitri and Valentina fought side by side in the main tunnel, their movements flowing together like they'd been partners for years instead of hours. When Dimitri fired at a Kethmore soldier, Valentina was already moving to cover his blind spot. When she called out target information, he was already shifting to engage before she finished speaking. "It's like they can read each other's minds," Petra observed from the command center, monitoring multiple combat feeds. "Look at the efficiency ratings. Paired fighters are operating at nearly 300% normal effectiveness." "It's not telepathy," Helena replied, reloading her rifle without taking her eyes off the approaching enemy. "It's trust. Complete, absolute trust. When you know someone will die before they let you fall, you can take risks that would be suicide otherwise." The proof came when a squad of 6 warriors broke through the outer perimeter. These were creatures bred for war, with chitinous armor and razor-sharp claws, moving with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. By all tactical analysis, they should have overwhelmed the human defenders. Instead, they met Jazz and Riley. The 2 pilots had never fought together on the ground before, but their connection in the air translated seamlessly to close combat. Jazz would dive low, drawing fire, while Riley struck from above. When one needed to reload, the other was already providing cover. They moved like dancers, like lovers, like 2 parts of the same deadly whole. "Target down," Jazz called out, putting 3 rounds into a warrior's weak point just behind its skull. "2 more approaching from your 7, Riley responded, already shifting position to intercept. "I see them. You take left, I take right." Always. The 6, bred to fight as a collective, couldn't adapt to opponents who fought as something more than a collective but less than a hive mind. They fell back, confused and damaged, reporting to their queens about incomprehensible human combat behaviors. But it was in the deeper tunnels where the real revelation occurred. A group of civilians, mostly older couples who had refused evacuation, found themselves face to face with a Nulgath energy being. The creature approached confidently, expecting to feed on their terror and despair as it had countless times before. Instead, it encountered something that sent it fleeing in apparent agony. Valentina reviewed the security footage later, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "They're not just resistant to the emotional drain," she explained to Dimitri as they took a brief rest between attacks. "They're actually hurting the Nulgath. Look at this couple, married 43 years. When the creature tried to feed on them, their combined emotional field didn't just resist, it attacked back." "How is that possible?" "I think it's the depth of the connection," Valentina said, pulling up more data. "These aren't just people who love each other. These are people whose souls have become so intertwined that they function as a single emotional entity. To the Nulgath, trying to drain that is like trying to eat molten steel." They were interrupted by an urgent communication from the surface. Tobias "Brick" Murphy, their heavy weapons specialist, was reporting something unprecedented. "You're not going to believe this." Brick's gravelly voice came through the speakers. "The aliens are retreating. Not falling back, not regrouping. Full retreat. And they're arguing among themselves while they do it." The command center fell silent except for the hum of equipment. "Are you certain?" Helena asked. "Absolutely. I can see their command ship from here. It's broadcasting on all frequencies, and it doesn't sound happy. The translator's picking up words like unacceptable losses and tactical reevaluation required." Petra's fingers flew over her keyboard, pulling up intercepts from the alien fleet. "He's right. They're not just retreating from this sector. Long-range sensors show movement across all combat zones. They're pulling back to orbit." "But why?" Jazz asked, his arm still around Riley's waist as they caught their breath. We're winning, but we haven't inflicted that kind of damage. Valentina looked at Dmitri, seeing her own understanding reflected in his eyes. It's not about the damage we've inflicted, she said slowly. It's about the damage we could inflict. They came here expecting to fight humans. Instead, they're fighting something they don't understand. Something that gets stronger when threatened, more dangerous when cornered, more effective when it has something to lose. They're scared, Dmitri said with dawning realization. Terrified, Valentina corrected. Because every tactical model they have says we should be broken by now, cut off from our command structure, separated from our loved ones, reduced to individual units fighting hopeless battles. Instead, we've become more unified, more determined, more deadly. That evening, as the alien fleet maintained its orbital distance and broadcast increasingly desperate demands for surrender, the resistance gathered in the main cavern. Couples sat together, families huddled close, and even strangers seemed to gravitate toward each other with an instinctive need for connection. Dmitri stood to address the group, but before he could speak, Valentina placed her hand on his arm. Together, she said simply. He nodded, understanding immediately. When they spoke, it was as one voice, their words interweaving naturally as they shared the platform. Today, we learned something important, Dmitri began. Something the aliens still don't understand, Valentina continued. They see our connections as weaknesses to exploit. But every bond between us makes us stronger. Every couple makes us more resilient. Every family makes us more determined. They came here with reinforcements, expecting to overwhelm us with numbers. Instead, they discovered that humans don't break under pressure. We bond. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Jazz and Riley sat near the front, her head on his shoulder, his hand stroking her hair. Petra had found someone too, a young engineer named David who looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the universe. Even the gruff Commander Voss was sitting close to Dr. Margaret Kim, the chief medical officer, their weathered hands intertwined. Tomorrow they'll try again, Dmitri said. With new strategies, new weapons, new species, Valentina added, but they still won't understand what they're fighting. Because we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for each other. And that makes us unstoppable. As the crowd dispersed, couples and families returning to their quarters, or taking shifts on watch, Dmitri and Valentina found themselves alone in a side chamber that had been converted into a private space. The adrenaline of battle was wearing off, replaced by something deeper and more profound. Are you all right? Dmitri asked, gently examining a cut on her forehead where debris had grazed her during the fighting. More than all right, she replied, catching his hand and holding it against her cheek. I'm alive. You're alive. And we just taught the galaxy something important about humanity. What's that? That love isn't just an emotion for us. It's a superpower. They kissed then, softly. At first then with growing passion. It was different from their first kiss the night before. That had been about finding each other in the darkness. This was about celebrating what they'd found, about the strength they'd discovered in their connection. I love you, Valentina whispered, against his lips. I know it's too soon, I know we've only known each other for— I love you too, he interrupted. And time doesn't matter anymore. Normal doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is this, us, what we are together. They made love that night in the deep chambers beneath Prague, their bodies joining as completely as their hearts already had. It was passionate and tender, desperate and gentle, a celebration of life in the face of extinction and a declaration of hope in the midst of war. Above them, the alien fleet continued its confused deliberations, trying to understand how a species they had dismissed as primitive had become their greatest fear. They had summoned reinforcements expecting to witness the destruction of humanity. Instead, they were witnessing its transformation. Because when humans were pressed to the breaking point, they didn't break. They bonded. And those bonds, forged in fire and sealed with love, were about to teach the galaxy why Earth's children were the most dangerous force in the universe. The reinforcements had arrived. Now they were about to learn what true terror looked like. The message came at midnight, 3 days after the alien fleet's retreat to orbit. Commander Helena Voss burst into the command center where Dmitri and Valentina were reviewing defensive strategies, her face grim with the weight of terrible news. "They're not retreating," she announced without preamble. "Long-range sensors show massive energy buildup in the fleet. They're preparing something called a sterilization protocol." Petra looked up from her workstation, her face pale in the blue glow of the monitors. "I've been tracking their communications. The 7 species have reached some kind of consensus. If they can't conquer us conventionally, they're going to glass the entire planet from orbit." "Timeline?" Dmitri asked, his arm automatically moving around Valentina's waist. 12 hours, Helena replied. "Maybe less. They're calling it the final solution to the human problem." The command center fell silent, except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of people going about their daily routines in the deeper chambers. Families sharing meals, couples talking quietly, children playing games that helped them forget the world above was trying to kill them. "They're going to murder everyone," Jazz said quietly, his hand finding Riley's across the tactical display table. "Every human on Earth. Because they're afraid of what we might become." "No," Valentina said, her voice carrying a strange certainty that made everyone turn to look at her. "They're afraid of what we already are, and they're about to find out why that fear is justified." She moved to her research terminal, calling up weeks of data about human emotional patterns, alien behavioral responses, and the growing phenomenon they'd all witnessed, but not fully understood. "I've been analyzing the patterns, the way our connections affect their species. It's not just that bonded humans are harder to break down, it's that we're creating something new, something unprecedented in their experience." "Explain," Helena commanded. Valentina's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up a 3-dimensional model of energy patterns. "Every human generates an electromagnetic field based on emotional states. Fear, anger, despair create chaotic, easily disrupted patterns. But love, especially deep romantic love, creates coherence, order, and when multiple coherent patterns synchronize." The display showed 2 energy signatures merging, then amplifying, creating something that pulsed with visible power. "We're not just individuals anymore. We're becoming nodes in a network powered by the strongest force in the universe." "Love," Riley whispered. "Love," Valentina confirmed. "But not the gentle, passive emotion they think it is. Human love is fierce, protective, willing to destroy anything that threatens what it cherishes. And when you network that kind of love across an entire species..." She didn't need to finish. The implications were clear in the slowly spreading smiles around the command center. "We need to get everyone together," Dmitri said. "Every couple, every family, every person who's found someone to care about. All in one place." "The main cavern," Helena agreed, "and we need to do it now." The next few hours were a flurry of activity as the entire Prague resistance gathered in the massive natural cathedral that formed the heart of their underground complex. Word spread through other bunkers worldwide, and soon, video feeds were linking resistance cells across the globe. London, Tokyo, New York, Sydney, São Paulo. Everywhere humans had found ways to love each other in the face of extinction. As dawn approached on the surface, nearly 5,000 people had assembled in the cavern, but they weren't gathering as individuals. They were coming together as pairs, as families, as chosen groups bound by affection and shared purpose. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an energy that grew stronger with each new arrival. "Can you feel it?" Valentina asked Dmitri as they stood before the assembled crowd. Around them, other couples were taking their positions. Jazz and Riley, Petra and her engineer David, even Helena and Dr. Kim standing close together at the command station. "Like electricity in the air," Dmitri replied, "but warmer, more alive. Above them, the alien fleet was moving into position for their final assault. 7 species, hundreds of ships, weapons capable of turning continents to glass. By every measure of military might, humanity was about to be extinguished. Instead, they were about to evolve. Valentina stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the cavern's natural acoustics. Today we stop running. Today we stop hiding. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the people humans love. They think love makes us weak, Dmitri continued, his words echoing off the stone walls. They think our bonds are chains that hold us back. They don't understand that love doesn't make us vulnerable. It makes us infinite. The response came not as cheers or battle cries, but as something deeper, a harmonic resonance as 5,000 voices began to speak as one, sharing words of love, commitment, and unbreakable determination. Couples turned to each other, hands intertwining, hearts synchronizing, and the energy in the cavern began to build. On the surface. Alien sensors detected the anomaly immediately. Energy readings spiked beyond their instruments' ability to measure. Electromagnetic patterns that had never been recorded in galactic history pulsed from the planet's surface. Kethmore Commander Sixthek stared at his displays in growing alarm. "What are they doing down there?" "Unknown," his aide replied. "The energy signature is unprecedented. It doesn't match any known weapon system." "Then it's not a weapon," Sixthek said grimly. "Fire all batteries. Eliminate the source immediately." The first barrage of orbital bombardment lit up the sky like a second sunrise. Massive energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and exotic matter, weapons designed to crack planets, struck the Earth's surface with devastating force. Mountains vaporized, oceans boiled, and continents shook with the impact. But in the deep caverns, something extraordinary was happening. As the attack reached its crescendo above, the assembled humans were reaching a crescendo of their own. Every couple, every family, every pair of lovers joined their emotional energy into a growing network of connection. What had started as individual bonds became something larger, more powerful, more terrifying than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dmitri and Valentina stood at the center of it all, their love serving as the focal point for the energy building around them. But they weren't controlling it. No one was. Instead, they were all part of it, nodes in a network of human connection that spanned the globe. "I can feel them," Valentina whispered, tears streaming down her face. "All of them. Every human who's ever loved someone. Everyone who's ever been willing to die for another person. We're not just a species anymore," Dmitri replied, his voice filled with awe. "We're something new, something the universe has never seen." The energy reached critical mass as the alien bombardment intensified. And then, something impossible happened. The energy struck back. It erupted from the planet's surface like a solar flare made of pure emotion, racing through space at impossible speeds. When it reached the alien fleet, the results were instantaneous and devastating. Ships didn't explode. They simply stopped. Crews of different species found themselves overwhelmed by sensations they had no words for. The cold, calculating Kethmore experienced warmth and compassion for the first time in their evolutionary history. The hive-minded Sixva suddenly understood individual identity and personal choice. The energy-feeding Nulgath discovered that there were emotions that nourished rather than consumed, but it was more than just sensation. It was understanding. For a brief, terrible moment, every alien in the fleet experienced what it meant to be human. To love so deeply that you would fight impossible odds. To care so completely that losing someone mattered more than losing your own life. To be part of something larger than yourself while still maintaining your individual identity. It terrified them. Commander Sixthek found himself thinking of his mate back on the homeworld, remembering the quiet moments they shared between military campaigns. The feeling was so alien, so contrary to everything his species valued, that he physically recoiled from his command console. "What did they do to us?" he demanded, but his aide couldn't answer. She was staring at her own claws, wondering for the first time what it would feel like to touch someone gently instead of only in violence. Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Hardened warriors were experiencing compassion. Logical strategists were feeling irrational affection. Cold-blooded killers were discovering empathy, and they hated it. Not because it was wrong, but because it felt so right, that it called everything they were into question. "Retreat," Sixthek ordered, his voice shaking. All ships immediate retreat, maximum distance. Sir, the mission parameters. The mission is over, he roared. We cannot destroy them, we cannot conquer them. They are… He paused, searching for words to describe something his language had no terms for. They are becoming something that will remake the galaxy simply by existing. As the fleet began its panicked withdrawal, emergency transmissions flooded subspace communications. Every species in the galactic community received the same message: stay away from the Sol system. The humans are not what we thought they were. They are something new, something dangerous, something that could change everything we know about civilization itself.